He says, 11 years into this pontificate, Francis remains popular among Americans who identify as Catholics. Some 75% of self described Catholics in this country have a positive view of the Holy Father. This shouldn't be a surprise. His care for the poor and marginalized, his concern for the environment, and his witness to peace have widespread appeal. But, as with all modern leaders, Francis is not without critics. His past comments about backward looking and reactionary attitudes in American Catholic life have caused resentment among some faithful Catholics. Well, let me stop it right there. It shouldn't. It shouldn't. Because he's right. He is dead on. There is some backward looking, and I don't mean in any kind of traditional way. I don't mean in any sense of affirming tradition. I mean the people who claim to affirm tradition, but they don't. They claim to be looking into the past and tradition, but they're not. And that's what he's talking about. And reactionary, absolutely reactionary. Yes. And obviously, this is not all American Catholics that he's referring to. He's talking about some American Catholics. And it's not unique to American Catholics. I mean, it's a problem worldwide, but it is, I think, indicative of some American Catholics. So yeah, I mean, he's right to address that. The fact that it has caused resentment among some faithful Catholics is because those faithful Catholics are confused and haven't done due diligence to see what Pope Francis is really getting at. So either they are faithful Catholics who are misunderstanding the Holy Father, or they're not actually faithful Catholics. One of the two. Could be a combination of the two. In his view of church leadership in the United States, often perceived as negative, and his view of church leadership in the United States, often perceived as negative, has perplexed American bishops who, as a body, have a long record of loyalty and generosity to the Holy See. Um, Maybe as a body, that could be argued. Um, but I would point out two things to His Excellency. Pope Francis isn't talking about the American bishops as a body. So to appeal to how the bishops are as a body is irrelevant here because Pope Francis's critics has not been to the American bishops as a body. You'll recall Pope Francis's comments in reference to American bishops was in the context of the American bishops who criticized Pope Francis. That's not all American bishops. It's not the American bishops as a body. But since we are going to talk about American bishops as a body, and His Excellency is going to put this out in public rather than in private, rather than just privately addressing Pope Francis with his concerns, since he wants to bring this into the public forum for open discussion. Let's have a conversation about that. I asked some honest questions. Have the bishops in America as a body really done everything that they can to back up Pope Francis? Honest question. Honest question. Have they? It seems to me that the American bishops have, as a body, have been missing in action in some very key conflicts in the church right now. So, while I'm sure His Excellency really believes that this is the case, and to an extent, I'm sure it is true, I think that there has been a failure on part of the American bishops to defend the Holy Father in some very key and critical issues in this pontificate. So since he wants to bring that up, that needs to be considered. But again, Pope Francis's comments weren't in reference to the American bishops as a body. It was in reference to the ones who criticize him, overly criticize him. Strickland, Vigano, Burke. That is who he was responding to. That is who he was reacting to, not the American bishops as a body. So let's keep that in mind. A possible pastoral visit to the United States recently reported in a fringe Catholic newspaper would be welcome and could be an opportunity for the Holy Father to see the Catholic Church here in a different light. True, that would help. You know what would have helped? If the bishops as a body had defended Pope Francis, at least in a fraction of the cases that he has been targeted by many vicious critics, even in the United States, even from the episcopal rank in some cases. That would have also helped to establish a good impression on Pope Francis's part. So rather than saying, hey, well, if he just comes and sees how we are, well, yeah, or the United States bishops as a body could come out and defend Pope Francis a little bit more, because he's getting attacked by some of their own. And I haven't heard them addressing that. When was the last time you heard the American bishops as a body address Vigano's insane slander against Pope Francis? Or the wild stuff going on with Strickland? Have they come out as a body and addressed that and defended Pope Francis? It seems to me that they've been missing in action in some pretty important battles that really concerns them because they're American bishops. That would also help. The fact that they don't collectively come to his defense sometimes, I'm sure makes Pope Francis kind of feel like, well, hey, if you're going to let some of your bishops attack me viciously like this and you're not going to say a word, well, I guess to some extent you condone that. So I could see how the Holy Father probably wouldn't have a great view of American bishops in light of that. Now, again, that might not be reflective of how the American bishops are as a body. I understand that. But a failure to speak up in some of these areas, I'm sure has led him to feel slighted. On the matter of bishops, he says, I have some experience. A Catholic convert in my college years ago. In my college years, I went on to be ordained a priest and served for a decade in Rome as an official in the Vatican's congregation, now dicastery, for bishops, the office tasked with evaluating and recommending men for the episcopate. The work was largely bureaucratic. It consisted of research, reports, meetings, correspondence, and related staff duties, but it was a thorough education in the strengths and potential problems in the selection process for ministry as a bishop. Based on what I saw and staffed, the process was and remained sound. Not perfect, but nonetheless objective in essence, with plenty of checks and balances along the way. I'll have to take his word for it. I feel like if that's the truth, then why do we have such a problem with some of these bishops? It's strictly confidential, which precludes public lobbying, campaigning, and political maneuvering, at least in the manner so common in the secular world. It's also highly consultative, involving 25 to 40 clergy and lay consultations with men and women familiar with the candidate under their consideration. All this is governed by canon law and directed by the apostolic nuncio, the papal ambassador in each given country. He says, I've been away from Rome now for nearly 2 decades. I've experienced the selection process from its other end. I've served as a bishop in the United States for the past 16 years, both as an auxiliary and now as an ordinary, the bishop in charge of a diocese. No matter what a man knows in advance, the ministry of a local bishop is a surprise and a challenge. I can see that. Whatever social prestige Catholic bishops once enjoyed is long gone. I don't know about that one. Whatever social prestige Catholic bishops once enjoyed is long gone. I can see how the reputation of Catholic bishops has been tarnished with the abuse crisis, as he points out. I can see that, but honestly, from where I stand, it still seems to me that the bishops live like kings and get served like kings. It still seems to me that they have that prestige. So I don't know if this is exactly true. I think that might be stretching it. Surely they have taken a hit, but I don't know if they've taken that much of a hit, because it seems to me they live like kings on the whole. The clergy abuse crisis buried it. Today, the reality can be quite the opposite. But this is not finally a loss, because true Christian leadership is a privilege only insofar as it involves service to others in a spirit of humility. Amen. I agree with that. I don't know if that's indicative of everyone. That's probably indicative of him, but I don't know if that's indicative of everybody, you know. But I appreciate what he's saying here. In my case, life as a bishop has been a blessing because my brother U.S. bishops have been overwhelmingly good, committed men. It's good to hear. They have very different skills and personalities, all have strengths and weaknesses, and none of them is close to perfect, but they're faithful to the church and devoted to their people. Not all of them. Not all of them. Let's be honest. Not all of them. So some of them are seeing are very much in dissent against the magisterium. But I guess he's speaking just kind of in general. They're also unquestionably loyal to Pope Francis. Not all of them. And I think what's unfortunate is for those who haven't been loyal to Pope Francis, and more importantly, loyal to the magisterium, because it's not about a particular pope, it's about the magisterium. Um, the fact that they are vocally in dissent against Pope Francis, and the fact that collectively the U.S. bishops haven't called him out. Frankly, almost none of the bishops have publicly called him out. I'm pretty sure that makes Pope Francis feel like, yeah, no, I don't think that you guys are loyal to, to this pontificate. I could totally see how Pope Francis would feel that way. I mean, honest question. Have you heard any bishop rebuking Vigano? Rebuking Burke? Rebuking Strickland? Some might say, well, it's being done privately. Okay. That only takes you so far, because the chaos that they've created has been public, and the slander that some of them have engaged in has been public, and the confusion that they've created has been public, and therefore a public response from the bishops is necessary, not private, public. And have the United States bishops as a whole, or frankly, even individually, have they addressed this stuff? Honestly, I feel from where I sit, I feel they're missing in action. Why is it that me as a layman has to review this stuff and tell you why it's wrong? Why aren't bishops doing that more? Why aren't they saying something? Why aren't they giving some direction to the faithful? I suspect it's because they're not aware of how severe the situation is. And that might be why they have this disconnect between what Pope Francis is saying and what they think, because they're thinking, hey, we're really loyal. Maybe you're not aware of some of this other stuff. They're also unquestionably loyal to Pope Francis, which makes his ambiguities and seeming criticisms difficult to understand. I'm sorry, but he's not being ambiguous here. I'm not buying the ambiguity card, with all due respect to His Excellency. I don't believe the successor of St. Peter is being ambiguous. I don't know where that's coming from. I know that's where the critics, I know that comes from them and what they're saying, but I don't know where that comes from his perspective. And then seeming criticisms difficult to understand. Maybe if you're not aware of what all's going on in the church right now in the United States, it's difficult to understand. But if you're aware of what's going on right now, and I think bishops need to be, of all people, it's the bishops who need to be, it wouldn't be difficult to understand. It would actually be very easy to understand. So what this tells me is His Excellency is sincerely confused by what Pope Francis is saying, most likely because he's not aware of how severe the situation has become. And that tells me, well, that explains why they're not speaking up. That explains it right there. So they're kind of blindsided by this, but they shouldn't be. They kind of should already know. Now, again, in fairness to the bishops, look, they're busy. I get it. They got a lot of stuff going on, but you got to have some advisors or something that are keeping an eye on this. And hey, look, Bishop Conley, I'll help you out. I'll be an advisor to you for free if you want. I can tell you what's going on in the church in the United States so that you don't have to go and, keep up with all that. I get it. You're a busy man. Have other people do that for you. Get good people who can do that for you on your team. There's people who do it for free. I'll do it for free. Any bishop out there who wants advice on what is going on social media, what is going on with Catholics in the United States, hey, I'm certainly available. I'm here, and I'm sure that there are many others who are out there who will do it for free. He says, so what's the point of these thoughts? Simply this: before the Holy Father makes his next visit to the United States, I'd ask him to spend a little time familiarizing himself with the real terrain of American Catholic life. I know this was well intentioned, but I'm not sure this was a good look. I honestly think that Bishop Conley and the rest in the United States need to familiarize themselves with their own terrain first. You can't expect the Holy Father to familiarize himself with the terrain of American Catholic life when it seems to me the bishops in the United States aren't familiar with their own terrain. I wouldn't have said that. I certainly would have posted this publicly. I don't know why he made this a public article when he can contact the Holy Father directly and privately. He has access to the Holy Father, so he could have sent this feedback to him directly. Since he wants, however, to bring this into the public forum, it's fair for us to comment on it publicly. And I'll do so with all due respect to His Excellency and for his office. I don't know if this was the right move, because I kind of feel like that's advice that both he and the rest of the bishops in the United States need to take to heart first before they can ask Pope Francis to do this. He says that Francis needs to do this because so much of it is hopeful and good despite the many challenges we face. Well, I really hope that's true. I really hope that's true. That's be a wonderful thing, right? If if the situation in the United States, were hopeful and good despite some challenges. I really hope that's true. But from where I stand, I think that might be minimizing the challenges. As one of my brother bishops notes in the recent book, True Confessions, Voices of Faith from a Life in the Church, there's a great hunger for beauty among our nation's Catholics. The sacramental imagination is still alive, and if you feed that imagination, people's needs for something sacred and true, something beautiful and greater than themselves, and combine it with active outreach and social ministry, the results are impressive. It gives me a lot of hope. When you watch our young parents and children get all excited as they discover Jesus Christ and his church, you realize that the same message was preached 20 centuries ago, and it still has enormous impact despite all the world's distractions and changes in culture and technology. The Lord continues to do his work, and the work still bears fruit. We just need to be nimbler in addressing the challenges that are coming our way, and we need to be more willing to speak the truth, even when it's not welcome, even when it has a cost. The men in our country who accept an appointment as bishop today are, by and large, men who know full and well that they will suffer. I don't know. This is just a very different world than the one I live in and what I see. I'm sorry, I just don't see the bishops suffering like that in the United States. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misinformed. Again, I understand that they're taking some heat for the abuse crisis. Okay, I get that. I don't know if they're really suffering that much. It seems to me like they're pretty privileged. It seems to me like they live pretty good. I don't know. They're men who are ready to carry the cross of Christian leadership and have prepared themselves through deep prayer. Okay, I hope that's the case. Faithful theological formation and pastoral experience in the trenches. I really hope that's the case. I really do. Their eyes are wide open to the social and cultural toxicity of our times. I'm not sure that's true. I don't think they realize how severe it is in their own territory. While the future will not be easy, they were made for these times. I hope that's true. And those who are chosen and who accept the call to serve as a bishop are, in my estimation, zealous for the task. They need and they deserve encouragement, clarity, and support from the man who holds the office of Peter. Okay. With all due respect, the Holy Father is the one who I think has the greater need for encouragement and support from the U.S. bishops. Yes, it's a two-way street, and Pope Francis needs to encourage and support them. Sure. But it seems to me like Pope Francis is the one taking most of the heat from American bishops. Not all of them, but some. And it seems to me like the American bishops collectively, and many of them individually, are silent on that matter. Where are they in encouraging the successor of St. Peter? And I also want to say, if the bishops want their leader to give them support, I want to say that's exactly how many laity feel about our bishops. We want our leaders, our bishops, to give us support. And frankly, I don't know if there has been a lot of support. I kind of have to, again, bring us back to the question, where are the bishops in addressing the massive crisis right now in the Catholic Church with radical traditionalism and radical progressivism? Both, from both directions. We're having to deal with both of those battles from two fronts. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of laity who feel like the bishops might be missing in action here. They're just not aware of what's going on. And some of us don't feel very supported by the episcopate. And so if they want support from their hierarchs, or their higher ups, I should say, their leaders, they have to make sure that they are doing that as leaders themselves. Because if I, as a father, if I want my dad to be supportive of me as his son, I have to also ask the question, am I being supportive of my children? It's a fair question, right? If I want support from my father, I, as a father, also need to ask the question, am I being supportive of my children? And if I'm failing to some degree in that duty, I'm sure my children will be a little confused and scratching their head if they heard me saying, well, I wish my dad supported me a little bit more. They'd probably be thinking, well, you're one to talk. I wish you supported me more, So, okay, sure, maybe Pope Francis can work on this. I think they could also work on being supportive of them. But I think they might need to ask the question, are they being supportive of the laity and the faithful who are out there fighting zealously for the faith with very little episcopal support? I mean, just a statement from a bishop would go a long way, a really long way. Have any of the bishops called out Taylor Marshall and all the wackiness that we see going on online with online Catholicism? Have any of them called it out? Just one statement from them would go a long way. So when I read this, I kind of feel like, maybe this should have been private to Pope Francis, because when you put it out there in public, it's fair for us to discuss this respectfully. Canon 212, expressing our concerns publicly. So when you put these concerns out publicly with the Holy Father, it's fair for laity to publicly express some concerns about this. And he says Pope Francis can provide all three. We should hope and pray that he will do exactly that. Well, I honestly feel like they need to take the focus off what Pope Francis needs to do, and they need to ask some questions like, what can they be doing? With all due respect. And there's a lot of stuff that I could recommend if they're asking, if they want to know. Yeah, back to Ashley says, why was this letter made public? That's a good question. I don't know if that was the right angle. Again, since he made this public, it's free for us to discuss it and express concerns with anything in there. But yeah, I think that this may have been better for him to have sent to Pope Francis privately, because what this does is it opens it up for a two-way conversation. It's a two-way street. So if we're going to criticize Pope Francis for failing to um, support people who are under him, the bishops in the United States, okay, it's two-way street. Maybe there's some room for conversation about criticism for a lack of episcopal support for people who are under the bishops, priests, deacons, and laity. It opens up that conversation because it is a two-way street here. So to put it out there public, you open that conversation. And, I'm kind of glad he opened that conversation because it's a conversation that really needs to be had. And perhaps we can charitably have that conversation with our shepherds by expressing our concerns to them. Since he made this public, I'm expressing my concerns public. If he had made them private, I would have expressed my concerns private. But again, since he made it public, it opens it up for me to express these concerns publicly. So if you're asking, Michael, why didn't you reach out to him privately? Because he expresses publicly. That's why. Making it public is further evidence of their bad judgment. I think it's probably not the best judgment for this situation, especially in light of the fact that the Holy Father is actually very justified in what he said, if properly understood. And I think bishops should be able to understand what he was saying. Again, I don't expect random people to follow what all's going on, but I think that bishops should, it's kind of their duty to know what's going on in the church, and they should be able to understand clearly what Pope Francis was saying. I don't think there's room for them to say he's ambiguous or it's puzzling. I don't think there's room for that. I can tell you what he's saying, and I'm just a layman. And if I could tell you that as a layman, surely a bishop would need to know what Pope Francis meant. Need and can. And again, if not through direct knowledge, through consultation of good advisors. And hey, I'm throwing out my availability. Any bishops who are listening, you want advice, you want help, I'm more than happy to offer it to you. You want a good perspective on what's going on a lay level on social media? I give you a really good idea of what's going on and tell you a lot about that. And again, I'll offer my support to bishops for free. Because I love the church and I want to support the shepherds. I want to help them the best that I can. So I'm just throwing it out there. How many bishops are even digitally literate so that they understand the situation? Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if they don't have the time, and I don't suspect that they would, that's understandable. I don't expect a bishop to be on Twitter all day long like Bishop Strickland or something. I don't expect them to do that. I understand that. What I'm saying is, at least have some really good advisors. As a bishop, you want to have some really good advisors who are aware of what's going on and who can kind of tell you what's going on. So when you say, when you see something from Pope Francis and you're like, this doesn't make sense, ask your advisor, and your advisor can say, actually, here's where Pope Francis is coming from, and there's some legitimacy to what he's saying. And then you would get that. So you would get that explanation. And then you don't have to publish public criticisms of Pope Francis like this. You don't have to do that because you then have good advisors who can tell you in private, actually, here's what Pope Francis is talking about. And then as a bishop, you can better understand it. It just reflects to me what I've already suspected for a while, and that is the bishops don't appear to be very aware of what all is going on right now in the church, in this particular area at least. And it seems to me they need some good advisors. How can we get your resume portfolio out there? Yeah, you can certainly email bishops, videos, this video, or any others that you feel relevant. Yeah, anything that you think is helpful. I know some bishops on occasion watch the show, but I just don't know how common that is. And so it seems to me that they could certainly use some help from laity in kind of filling them in on what all is going on. I mean, think about it like this. At the Second Vatican Council, or at many of the councils, you had paridi. You had people, who were, trained theologians there to advise the bishops. That's kind of what they need here. is not just trained theologians, but also people who are aware of just what's going on, feet on the ground. What's going on in the trenches. Um, it would help also if they're theologians at the same time. That would be nice. But not absolutely required if the person has a really good grasp of what's going on. But usually those things kind of go in hand in hand. You really want to understand kind of what's going on and make sense of it. You do need to have some kind of theological training. Okay. I think there's a lot of division between the JP2 and Benedict XVI and those appointed by Pope Francis. Yeah. Hey friends, do you want others to discover why the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus established? And do you want to help people make sense of all the confusion in the Catholic Church today? Help contribute to this mission by supporting Reason and Theology at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. By doing so, you'll also get access to exclusive content for patrons only. Also, if you want to deepen your faith, there are free ebooks and even courses that you can sign up for by visiting reason.podia.com.